My name is Cassandra Rowden. I'm 27, and for most of my life I felt like the kind of person people notice only if they stop moving for a second. Not intentionally overlooked, just convenient to ignore. My younger sister, Isabel, had a way of filling every room she walked into. Bright, loud, effortlessly charming. A calendar full of plans, a laugh that demanded attention. Growing up, I learned early that in my family, love often came in big gestures, laughter, and applause. I was quieter, cautious, always thinking 2 steps ahead, so I wouldn't accidentally bump into the spotlight. Good grades, polite responses, a steady hand for chores and errands. I was reliable, invisible, dependable, but rarely noticed. The one person who ever really saw me was my grandmother, Rosine Grandma Rose. She'd turned 65 last year, though she carried herself like numbers didn't matter. Her home, just 10 minutes from my parents', was a cozy jumble of photo albums, teacups with tiny chips, and memories that nobody else seemed to care about. As a child, I would bike over when the house felt too heavy. She'd already have the kettle on, waiting, as if she knew I'd need her that day. We'd sit at her kitchen table, talking over shows we'd never bothered to replicate, me telling her how it felt to always be the responsible one, how exhausting it was to step aside while everyone else seemed to claim their space. She never interrupted, never judged. She just listened, letting me fill the quiet gaps of the house that was supposed to be mine too. When I moved out at 23, I chose an apartment closer to her than to my parents, almost instinctively. Helping her with appointments, groceries, even online banking became my small, steady joy. Not because I had to, but because being needed by someone who genuinely appreciated it felt safe. My parents? They never understood. Once, when I offered to take her to a doctor's appointment, my mom laughed. "You don't have to play nurse." I smiled, didn't explain that I liked helping someone who actually saw me. Isabel, of course, disapproved. "You act like she's your mom," she said once, rolling her eyes. I shrugged. Someone has to make sure she doesn't miss her appointments. That ended the discussion. Everything seemed fine until Isabel started dating Derek. Derek, 29. A salesman with a voice loud enough to fill the room and a confidence that made my chest tighten every time he spoke. My parents adored him instantly. Grandma Rose was polite, restrained, like she'd encountered many like him before. But Derek had history with me too, subtle and sharp enough to sting. High school teasing that I'd brushed off then as nothing. Now it was woven into family gatherings. "Still no boyfriend? And you and your grandma like some little old ladies' club?" He joked, smirking. My parents laughed. I stopped reacting. By spring, my mom had created a family group chat. Rose's 65th. Balloons, confetti, emojis everywhere. Plans for a big party at my parents' house, photos, guests, tablecloths, decorations. I gently suggested asking Grandma what she wanted. My mom typed 3 more messages mid-conversation, already planning napkin colors. So I asked Grandma myself. Her answer surprised me. "I don't need a circus. I just want to feel like someone actually wants to be with me, not just pass me around for pictures." Her words stuck. My heart clenched with the knowledge that, for once, I could do something meaningful for her birthday. I started saving quietly, planning a modest Paris trip, 2 weeks over her birthday. Flights, a small Airbnb, museum passes, simple, thoughtful, within budget. When I finally told Grandma, she cried. "No one's ever done anything like this for me," she said, covering her mouth. She wanted me to tell my parents, worried they'd be upset. I did. And that, I realized, was when the real drama began. My mom's voice over the phone had that controlled edge, the one that tries to make you feel guilty before you've even made a decision. "They were counting on you for the party," she said. "We already told people." I explained calmly that it wasn't a replacement party. It was her birthday, the one she wanted. My dad asked, "Couldn't you go another time?" I asked again. "Did you ask her what she wants?" That should have ended it. It didn't. Derek was added to the discussion soon after. His smile too wide, too knowing. "Family milestones should be celebrated together," he said, almost as if he were the voice of reason, not separate trips. I swallowed. "It's her birthday." My parents nodded along, as if he'd solved a problem that wasn't there. Then my mom delivered the line that would sting forever. "You come off a little negative. It brings the mood down. Maybe it's best if you don't come to the party. You'll already have Paris." I repeated it slowly. You're uninviting me from my own grandmother's 65th birthday because your daughter's boyfriend doesn't like my vibe. Silence. My parents waited for the tears, the argument, the begging. I said one word, okay. Isabel's gasp came next. Derek blinked. My heart ached, but I had already made my choice. I would celebrate Grandma's birthday on my terms, quietly, lovingly, and far from the chaos that labeled me the problem for simply showing up. The moment I hung up the call, I felt the weight settle over me. Not the anger I expected, but a tight, sinking exhaustion. My parents had officially decided I wasn't welcome at Grandma Rose's 65th birthday. And why? Because Derek didn't like my vibe. Because my quiet presence made him uncomfortable. Because Isabel wanted her boyfriend to feel like the center of the universe. I sat at my small kitchen table, the hum of my laptop and the kettle my only company, and I thought about what Grandma had said. I just want to feel like someone actually wants to be with me, not just pass me around for photos. That was it. That was the truth. Nothing else mattered. I had a modest raise at work, enough that I could finally do something I'd been dreaming about for years. Take her to Paris. 2 weeks. Flights booked. A tiny Airbnb close to the Marais. Museum passes. Cafes with cracked sidewalks where locals actually lived. I was nervous, never thought of myself as much of a traveler, but the thought of seeing Grandma's eyes light up? That was worth any anxiety. I told Grandma carefully a few weeks later. She didn't jump up, didn't ask for explanations. She just covered her mouth, a hand trembling slightly over her lips. No one has ever done anything like this for me, she whispered, tears welling. Then, almost immediately, we should tell your parents. They'll worry. I explained gently that the trip was something she wanted, that it wasn't about them. Grandma sighed, half smile, half resignation. Sometimes people only see what they want to see, darling. I braced myself for the fallout. My parents weren't pleased. My mom's text arrived first. They were counting on you. People already made plans. I reminded her calmly. It's her birthday, not a production for them. My dad added. Couldn't it wait? Another time. I asked if they had even asked Grandma what she wanted. That should have ended it. It didn't. Then came Derek. His video call popped up on my laptop one evening, grinning, arms folded. Look, he said, voice smooth. It's sweet you're taking her to Europe. But family milestones? Shouldn't they be celebrated with the whole family? I clenched my fists beneath the table. It's her birthday, I repeated. His smile widened. Right. But you'll be posting pictures, right? We'll see them. So it'll feel like we're there. My blood ran cold. They weren't just dismissing me, they were trying to control how Grandma celebrated, trying to manufacture the optics so Derek and Isabel would still feel satisfied. My parents nodded along like he just solved a problem none of us had. Then came my mother's words that cut sharper than anything else. You come off a little negative. Maybe it's best if you don't come to the party. You'll already have Paris. I repeated it slowly, carefully, letting each word land. You're uninviting me from my own grandmother's 65th birthday because your daughter's boyfriend doesn't like my vibe. They went silent. Isabel gasped. Derek blinked. My parents stared at me, waiting for the tears, the begging, the fight. Instead, I said simply, okay. It wasn't defeat. It was clarity. I would celebrate Grandma Rose's birthday on my terms. Quietly. Lovingly. Far away from a table where I'd been labeled the problem simply for showing up. Over the next few weeks, my days were consumed with the little details that made the trip special. I learned how to navigate Parisian metros, researched cafes that Grandma might like, found a bakery near the Seine that made her favorite almond croissants. I packed lightly, carefully, with little gifts hidden in corners of my suitcase. A French phrasebook, a scarf, a tiny notebook for her to jot memories. Every purchase, every plan, reminded me that this trip wasn't for anyone else. It was for her. And for the years she'd silently chosen me. At work, I kept the trip a secret. People would ask about summer plans. Oh, just a small vacation, I'd reply, letting them imagine whatever they wanted. Keeping it quiet made it feel sacred. This was my rebellion, yes, but not against my parents. It was against the idea that love could be measured in who showed up at a crowded table or who fit Derek's idea of positive energy. Grandma called me frequently as the departure date drew near, her excitement growing with every small update. Cassandra, she said one morning, do Do you know how rare this feels? How rare it is for someone to just see me. My throat tightened. I just wanted to make sure your 65th feels like your own, I said softly. She laughed a little mischievously. Then we'll make it unforgettable. You and me. No one else. I laughed too, even though a small shadow lingered at the edge of my joy. Isabel would throw her party. Derek would smile and raise his wine glass. My parents would nod at the right moments, pretending that appearances mattered more than presence. And I would fly to Paris with the one person who had always seen me, and together we would celebrate a birthday no one else could touch. The night before our departure, I packed the last of our bags and checked the tickets one final time. Grandma sat in her armchair, knitting something colorful, humming under her breath. You've really thought of everything, haven't you? She said, eyes twinkling. I wanted it to be perfect, I admitted, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Perfect, she said, is being with someone who loves you. Everything else is just scenery. And that was it. Everything else was just scenery. Paris awaited with its cobbled streets and quiet cafes, and I finally felt like we were stepping into a world where we weren't invisible, where love wasn't measured by applause, but by presence. The morning we left for Paris, the airport felt like a quiet kind of liberation. Grandma Rose, leaning lightly on her cane, smiled at the bustle around us like it didn't exist. Well, she said, eyes bright, if I'm going to be tired, I might as well be tired somewhere beautiful. I held her hand as we navigated the check-in lines, the security checks, the elevators that seemed to hum beneath our feet. Every small detail mattered. Making sure she had her medications, her favorite scarf folded neatly, tickets printed and tucked safely in my purse. I wanted this trip to be seamless, a small bubble of joy we could step into, leaving the rest of the world behind. Paris was everything and nothing like the movies. Cobblestone streets that jostled the ankles, cafe tables spilling onto the sidewalks, the smell of fresh bread mingling with exhaust fumes, laughter in every language. Grandma Rose moved slowly, but her eyes roamed constantly, soaking in every street corner, every passerby, every little detail that would have gone unnoticed at home. Look at that, she whispered, pointing at a small bookstore tucked between a florist and a cafe. I could get lost in here for hours. We did. We spent hours wandering, leafing through worn pages, touching the spines of novels that had traveled across centuries. Grandma hummed softly as I helped her balance the small purchases in my tote bag. I caught myself smiling, thinking how strange it was that the same people who had deemed me unworthy of attending her birthday back home had no idea this world even existed for us together. Each morning we found a small cafe for breakfast, croissants, butter, the faint bitter aroma of café au lait. Grandma practiced her French with the servers, stumbling over words but smiling at every correction. She laughed more freely than I'd ever seen her laugh at home. Paris had given her something simple. Space to be herself, to exist without commentary. Meanwhile, back home, the family group chat was buzzing in ways I couldn't help but follow discreetly. Balloons, emoji-laden messages, and the obligatory photos. Isabel posting herself mid-laugh, Derek raising a glass, my parents beaming at a table crowded with mismatched chairs. I scrolled through the images, heart tightening slightly, not from jealousy, but because the party looked hollow. Foil balloons taped crookedly to a wall, store-bought sheet cake in the center, half the room checking their phones. My grandmother's 65th birthday was happening without the birthday girl. Every image screamed the same thing. Appearances matter more than presence. I turned off my phone, sliding it into my bag. Paris was ours, and every moment with Grandma was proof that love didn't need validation from anyone else. At the Louvre, I watched her marvel at paintings she'd only seen in books, her fingers tracing the edges of frames, her head tilted in quiet reverence. She whispered facts she remembered from school trips decades ago. And I laughed along, scribbling notes for later so we could remember every detail. Every evening I posted a single photo online, simple captions, no dramatics. Grandma Rose at the same birthday morning. Eiffel Tower with the birthday girl. Comments rolled in. So beautiful. She deserves this. You're amazing. My parents didn't comment. Isabel didn't comment. But I could see in tiny ways that someone was paying attention. Someone else noticed. One afternoon we stopped at a tiny bakery hidden in a narrow lane. Grandma picked up a loaf of bread, inhaled the aroma like it was a sacred ritual, and turned to me with a mischievous glint. "I think we could eat our way through the whole city if we tried," she said. I laughed. "Then we'll need a map of every bakery in Paris," I joked, and she nodded solemnly, as if this were the most important plan of our lives. It was then I realized what had made this trip different from any family gathering. Here I wasn't invisible. My presence mattered. Every smile, every careful choice, every conversation flowed naturally. There was no competition, no judgment, no need to shrink to make someone else comfortable. The contrast hit me hard the night of her actual birthday. We sat in our small Airbnb kitchen, a modest cake with a single 65 candle flickering. Croissants from the morning still warm. I lit the candle, Grandma closed her eyes, and we sang softly, just the two of us. She cried again, brushing her fingers over my hand. "You didn't have to do all this," she whispered. I smiled through my own tears. "I wanted to. This is your day." Across the world, photos from my parents' party began trickling into the chat. Isabel mid-toast, Derek holding his glass up like a trophy, half the guests smiling awkwardly at cameras. Grandma wasn't there. The room, so carefully decorated, looked stiff, artificial. And I realized something quietly satisfying. This trip wasn't just a celebration. It was truth in motion. My parents had chosen optics. We had chosen love. Grandma looked at me, eyes gleaming, and said, "You know, Cassandra, they can throw all the parties they want. But this is what I'll remember." Paris didn't just give us streets and cafes and museums. It gave us clarity. It gave Grandma her birthday. And it gave me the realization that family doesn't always see who shows up quietly, who moves through life with care, who actually gives without expecting applause. But some things some people notice. And that's all that matters. By the third day in Paris, the city felt like our private world. Grandma Rose moved through the streets with quiet delight, and I followed, carrying our small tote of essentials, mentally marking the best spots for cafes and benches where she could rest. Every glance she gave me, every small laugh, reminded me why this trip mattered. But back home, the silence was deafening. Our family group chat, once alive with balloons and confetti, had gone still. No good wishes. No have fun. No emojis floating in celebration. Just emptiness. My parents, Isabel, Derek, they all knew we were here, yet none reached out. First it stung. Then I reminded myself. This wasn't about them. This was about Grandma Rose. Still, I couldn't ignore the undercurrent of tension. Messages started trickling in, indirect, half-hearted, guilt-laden. "Hope you're enjoying yourselves. We missed you." Isabel's texts were sharp, accusatory, but carefully disguised as concern. Derek stayed quiet, probably realizing he couldn't manipulate this scenario with a smug smile or sarcastic comment. One morning we sat at a tiny cafe on the left bank, croissants steaming, coffee warm in our hands. Grandma Rose watched a street musician play a violin, eyes alight. I asked if she missed home, missed the party, and she shook her head. "No," she said simply. "I missed attention, not company. And attention without love isn't worth a thing." I smiled. That was Grandma in a sentence, clarity, wisdom, and no room for pretense. She didn't need a grand table or a dozen well-meaning relatives. She needed someone who truly cared. And here I was. Meanwhile, Isabel began venting to friends, subtly painting me as selfish, dramatic, difficult. Derek chimed in occasionally, their voices carrying faintly across group chats, social media posts, and mutual acquaintances. The narrative they tried to build was clear. Cassandra had ruined everything by choosing Paris over family. But Cassandra had a weapon they couldn't see: consistency. Every day in Paris, I posted one careful story. Grandma Rose smiling at a street artist, trying a tiny pastry, laughing at a poorly translated menu. No captions demanding attention. No selfies, no grandstanding, just truth. And slowly friends and distant relatives began to comment. "She looks so happy. This is exactly how a birthday should be celebrated." By the time Grandma's actual birthday arrived, we had reached a rhythm. Morning croissants, a small cake with a single 65 candle, her favorite cafe for lunch, and a quiet walk along the Seine. I lit the candle, Grandma closed her eyes, and we sang softly. She cried. I held her hand, whispering reassurances. No cameras, no cheering crowd. Just her. Just us. Meanwhile, back home, the party photos continued to arrive. Isabel mid-toast, Derek holding his glass, everyone trying to smile at a camera that didn't matter. The house looked stiff. The balloons drooped. The cake sat untouched in some well-lit corner. My parents seemed uneasy in the pictures, as though they knew something was missing. And they were right. Something was missing. They had organized a party without the birthday girl. They had chosen appearances over presents. And it wasn't just a lesson in optics, it was a mirror reflecting who they really valued. On our last night in Paris, Grandma Rose and I sat on the tiny balcony of the Airbnb, looking at the lights of the city stretching into the distance. She held my hand tightly, her fingers trembling slightly, and said, "You know, Cassandra, some people wait a lifetime to be noticed. Some never are. But you've shown me that love isn't loud. It doesn't need to shout. It just is." Her words settled into me like sunlight through the clouds. I had not only given her the birthday she wanted, I had shown her, quietly and consistently, that she mattered. As we packed our bags the next morning, preparing to fly home, I felt a twinge of anticipation. Paris had been our sanctuary, but reality awaited. My parents, Isabel, Derek, they wouldn't forget that we had left them behind. And when we returned, there would be consequences. Sure enough, the moment we landed, my phone buzzed relentlessly. Messages from my mom, long rambling texts from my dad, a single angry text from Isabel. "You stole her from me." I didn't reply. Instead, I focused on getting Grandma home safely, carrying her bags and helping her to the car. The contrast between our quiet, meaningful trip and the chaos we'd left behind had never been clearer. A few days later, Grandma Rose asked me to drive her to my parents' house. She wanted a conversation face-to-face about everything that had happened. I braced myself. Isabel would be there. Derek too. My parents, as usual, would be defensive, protective, and angry. But Grandma's resolve was unwavering. She had spent 2 weeks seeing clearly who showed up when it mattered. And now, she was ready to make her decisions known. The drive to my parents' house felt heavier than usual. Grandma Rose sat quietly in the passenger seat, cane resting against her leg, her hands folded over her lap. Her eyes, however, were sharp, more alert than I had ever seen them. She wasn't anxious or angry. She was precise, calm, certain. When we arrived, the tension was palpable. My parents were already seated at the dining table, a neat stack of papers in front of them. Isabel and Derek hovered nearby, smirking with the kind of confidence only someone who believes they control the narrative can have. "Everyone's here," Grandma said quietly, leaning on her cane. She didn't smile. She didn't greet anyone. The silence pressed down, heavy and expectant. A man in a sharp suit rose from the corner of the room. "I'm Mrs. Rowden's attorney," he announced formally. My stomach dropped. I recognized the law firm immediately. This was serious. Grandma adjusted her glasses, her gaze sweeping the room. "We're updating my will," she said. "I want all of you to hear it together." The air went cold. My dad tried to joke nervously. "Mom, not so morbid." "I'm 65, not 16, she replied, voice steady. No one spoke. She had already taken the power from the room. The lawyer began to read. I listened carefully, tense, heart racing. Then he said the line that changed everything. "The majority of my estate, including my home and savings, will go to the grandchild who chose to celebrate my 65th birthday with me." My name rang out in the room like a bell. Cassandra Rowden. Silence. Total, suffocating silence. Isabel's jaw went slack. Derek's face turned red. My parents froze mid-breath. My grandmother's eyes softened slightly, but her tone remained firm. "You threw yourselves a party. You uninvited my granddaughter because a man you barely knew didn't like her presence. This is the reward for love, consistency, and care." Derek opened his mouth to protest. "It's emotional, but—" "You are a guest," Grandma said sharply. "Please do not interrupt." My mother tried, fumbling over her words. "But we did organize a celebration." "You—" "We already had a celebration," Grandma interrupted. "It was empty. It lacked meaning. Meaning isn't created by decorations, by wine glasses, or by appearances. It is created by those who show up when it matters." Isabel's eyes filled with tears, part shock, part fury. "You did this for her?" "For you," she accused. Grandma shook her head. "This isn't about revenge. It's about clarity. About recognizing who has been present without needing an audience. Derek's face twisted in frustration. It's not fair. You can't just. I can, Grandma said simply. I am of sound mind and I get to decide where my legacy goes while I am alive. If you do not understand that, that is your burden, not mine. The room erupted into chaos. Isabel cried, Derek raged, my parents tried to mediate, stammering apologies and excuses. And all the while I stayed quiet. I had no words. I didn't need them. Grandma had spoken for all of us. Later, Isabel sent me a message. Half anger, half grief. I hope you're happy. I didn't reply. The next morning, news came back. Derek had left her. He admitted to mutual friends that our family's obsession with appearances, control, and inheritance made him reconsider everything. Isabel was left to face the reality she had ignored for months. Through it all, Grandma remained calm. She didn't gloat. She didn't rub the inheritance in anyone's face. She simply lived her life, knowing she had chosen the person who consistently showed up for her, without expectation, without audience, without applause. For me, the entire experience was surreal. Paris had been our sanctuary. Grandma's will had been the confirmation that love, quiet, consistent, authentic, mattered more than optics. Family could judge, argue, protest, and try to manipulate, but the truth had been clear all along. I returned to my small apartment with Grandma a few days later. Life had not changed dramatically. The inheritance felt abstract, almost unreal. But the boundaries I had gained were tangible. I no longer felt obligated to force myself into rooms where I wasn't wanted. I no longer shrank to maintain peace. I no longer tolerated anyone else's version of what family should be when it contradicted reality. The days after the will reading felt strangely quiet, even eerie. My parents avoided me at every opportunity. Isabel texted only sporadically, and Derek had vanished from all family circles. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. Seen by the person who mattered most. Grandma Rose, as always, remained composed. She didn't celebrate her victory or call out anyone's failures. She simply lived in the truth she had always recognized. Each morning she would sit by the window sipping her tea, humming under her breath, and I would quietly help her with her little routines. Sorting photos, paying bills, organizing appointments. It was ordinary work, but it felt monumental because it was shared. We went back to our quiet Paris-like routines at home. Visiting her favorite diner, taking long walks in nearby parks, stopping to watch street performers, or chatting about decades-old memories. The world outside, family drama, judgments, social optics, seemed to fade in importance. Here, in this small bubble, her laughter was contagious, her stories were golden, and I was no longer a background character. Occasionally, I would glance at my phone, remembering the chaos left behind. My parents, once proud of orchestrating a grand 65th birthday, were now confronted with the truth. Attention without authenticity was meaningless. Isabel had to come to terms with Derek leaving her, realizing too late that she had allowed someone who didn't care for family to dictate her behavior. One evening, as we sat together flipping through a photo album I had put together for her Paris trip, she paused at a page where she had written a note in French. Those who show up when no one is watching are the ones who matter. I traced the words with my finger, heart full. You mean me? I asked softly. She looked at me with a sly smile. Yes, you, my dear. Always you. It struck me then. This wasn't about money, inheritance, or revenge. It was about presence, about showing up consistently, even when no one else appreciated it. The legacy Grandma left wasn't just financial. It was a lesson in discernment, in choosing wisely whom to invest your energy in, and in valuing authentic connection over convenience. Weeks turned into months. Life settled into a gentle rhythm. I continued my work, maintained my small apartment, and spent countless hours with Grandma Rose. I no longer felt compelled to participate in family gatherings that demanded pretense and pleasing others at the cost of my own dignity. Occasionally, Isabel would try to reach out, her messages a mix of apology and lingering bitterness. I responded with kindness, but I drew clear boundaries. This wasn't about harboring resentment, it was about self-respect. Some lessons are learned through experience, and some truths cannot be rushed. Grandma, meanwhile, flourished. She joined a local community group, met neighbors she'd never spoken to, and even started a small photography project, documenting her life in a way she had never done before. Each day she reminded me why showing up mattered, why small, consistent acts of care and love build a foundation stronger than any grand gesture. One afternoon, as we walked through a nearby park, a young mother passed by with her child. The little boy tripped and fell, and without hesitation, Grandma bent down, helped him up, smiled, and sent him on his way with a gentle word. She looked at me, chuckled softly, and said, "You see? Love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, patient, and present." I smiled, feeling the full weight of every choice I had made. Paris had been the start, the will had been the proof, but the true victory was the ongoing bond we nurtured daily. Presence had won over pretense. Authenticity had triumphed over appearances. And for the first time, I understood fully what it meant to show up for someone who sees you. The family remained distant, occasionally sending cards or perfunctory texts, but it no longer mattered. Grandma Rose and I had built a world that existed independently of their approval. And in that world, birthdays were not about decorations or optics. They were about love, presence, and the small, quiet gestures that truly define a life. As I tucked Grandma Rose in one night, brushing a stray hair from her face, she whispered, "Cassandra, thank you for seeing me, for being there when no one else did." I held her hand tightly. "Always, Grandma. Always." And in that moment I realized something profound. Family isn't defined by blood alone, nor by parties or appearances. Family is the people who show up when it matters. The people who choose you without judgment, without applause, without expectation. And Grandma Rose had taught me that lesson in the most extraordinary way imaginable. We closed the photo album, turned off the lights, and sat in quiet contentment. Outside, the city hummed as it always did, indifferent and alive. Inside, 2 generations of women, bound by love and care, rested easy, knowing that true presence once shown can never be erased.